Somewhere in Europe, about 40,000 years ago, a Neanderthal took a breath, and then another, and then never again. An entire species, one that had walked this earth for 400,000 years, was gone. First, forget everything you think you know. Neanderthals were not the hunched, grunting brutes of old museum dioramas. They were stocky, yes, built for cold climates, but they were intelligent, organized, and social. They made tools, they controlled fire, they lived in family groups. They were, by any reasonable definition, people. Here is the timeline that should stop you. Neanderthals appeared in Europe and Western Asia roughly 400,000 years ago. They survived ice ages, volcanic winters, and every climate shift the planet threw at them. Then, around 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens arrived in Europe. Within approximately 5,000 years, Neanderthals were gone. 5,000 years sounds long. In evolutionary terms, it is nothing. The world Neanderthals inhabited was brutal and beautiful. Ice Age Europe, vast cold plains, dense forests, megafauna everywhere, woolly mammoths, cave lions, giant elk. Neanderthals hunted all of it, not with ranged weapons, up close, which means they were not just intelligent, they were extraordinarily brave, or extraordinarily desperate, or both. Let's be precise about what the evidence actually shows. Neanderthals buried their dead, sometimes with objects, sometimes with what appears to be deliberate placement. They cared for their injured and elderly for months, even years. We know this because ancient skeletons show healed injuries that would have required sustained help to survive. They used red ochre pigment, possibly for body decoration or ritual. They made jewelry from eagle talons. These are not the behaviors of animals. These are the behaviors of a culture. And this, the Neanderthal brain was, on average, slightly larger than the modern human brain. Let that sit for a moment. The species we think of as dim and primitive had bigger brains than us. Brain size alone doesn't determine intelligence. Structure matters more. But it completely dismantles the old story. Neanderthals were not our intellectual inferiors. They were our cognitive cousins. So what happened when we met? For thousands of years, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals shared the same continent, the same hunting grounds, the same caves sometimes. They were aware of each other. We know this with certainty because of what scientists found in 2010. When researchers sequenced the Neanderthal genome, they found something that changed everything. If you are not of entirely African descent, between 1% and 4% of your DNA is Neanderthal, not ancient human, not a distant relative, Neanderthal. They didn't just coexist with our ancestors, they had children together. Those children had children, and their genes are in you right now, including immune system genes, cold adaptation genes, and genes that affect your skin and hair. So how did a species we interbred with disappear? There are 4 main theories, and the honest answer is probably all of them at once. 1, competition. Homo sapiens outcompeted Neanderthals for food and resources. 2, disease. We carried pathogens their immune systems had never encountered. 3, climate change. A volcanic winter around 40,000 years ago may have fragmented their already dwindling populations. 4, assimilation. They didn't go extinct so much as dissolve into us. The competition theory is compelling because of numbers. At their peak, The entire Neanderthal population of Europe may have been as low as 70,000 individuals, spread across a continent. Homo sapiens arrived with larger social networks, longer-range weapons, and possibly a more complex language system. In a contest for scarce resources, even a small, consistent advantage compounds quickly over centuries. The disease theory has a parallel that should feel familiar. When Europeans arrived in the Americas in the 1500s, indigenous populations collapsed, not primarily from warfare, but from diseases to which they had no immunity. Something similar may have happened to Neanderthals. Homo sapiens had spent tens of thousands of years in Africa and then Asia, accumulating exposure to a completely different disease landscape. Walking into Neanderthal territory, we may have been carrying invisible weapons we didn't even know we had. Then there is the quietest theory. They never truly ended. They simply became us. A small group can genetically disappear into a larger one over just a few generations, not through violence, but through intermarriage, through children raised in the dominant culture, through gradual absorption. The Neanderthal population was already tiny. The sapiens population was growing. In that mathematics, the word extinction may be the wrong word entirely. We know they left things behind. Cave markings in Spain, some of the oldest known symbolic art in Europe, were recently dated to a time before Homo sapiens arrived. Neanderthals may have made them. Eagle talon ornaments in Croatia, pigment-covered shells used as containers, perhaps for body paint, a flute-like instrument made from a bare bone. These are not accidents. These are expressions of something that looked, from the outside, remarkably like what we call being human. By around 42,000 years ago, Neanderthals had retreated to their last refuges. The Iberian Peninsula, modern Spain and Portugal, was where they held on longest. A site in Gibraltar, on the very southern tip of Europe, contains some of the last known Neanderthal remains, dated to approximately 38,000 years ago. After that, nothing. The archaeological record simply stops. Somewhere, there was a last Neanderthal. A single individual, or perhaps a tiny group, who were the final living members of a species that had existed for almost 500,000 years. We don't know if they were alone. We don't know if they knew others like them were gone. We don't know if they died violently or peacefully or simply of old age, in a cave, beside a fire they had learned to build. What we do know is what they were capable of. They grieved. The evidence of Neanderthal burials, bodies placed carefully, sometimes with flowers or ochre, suggests an understanding of death that implies an understanding of life. They planned. Some Neanderthal tools required multiple steps and materials gathered from different locations, the result of forethought, not reflex. They communicated in ways complex enough to coordinate hunts of animals 10 times their size. They were, in the deepest sense, aware. Did the last Neanderthals know they were disappearing? Did they notice that the groups were getting smaller, that fewer children were being born, that the other people, the ones with the different tools, were everywhere now? We cannot know. But we know they buried their dead, which means, at minimum, they understood loss. And if they understood loss, it is not unreasonable to wonder if, in those final years, the last of them felt something like grief. But here is what is true. They did not entirely disappear. Every person reading this who traces ancestry outside Africa carries Neanderthal DNA. Genes that help your immune system fight certain infections. genes that help you tolerate cold, genes expressed in your skin, your hair, your blood. The last Neanderthal died, but Neanderthals, in the most literal biological sense, did not. They are still here, in you. When the last Neanderthal died, was there anyone left who noticed? Was there a grave? Was there a moment of silence? Or did they simply stop, alone, as the wind moved across an empty landscape? We will never know, but we can ask. And the fact that we can ask, the fact that 40,000 years later, we are still telling their story, might be the closest thing to a memorial they ever received. 400,000 years on Earth, and in the end, not a single one left. Except, perhaps, in us. Subscribe. The ape that never stopped asking why.